when you are to record this. Thank you. So welcome everybody to this Dharma talk, which I've called When the Squeeze is On. And yes, we're all being asked. There's a big demand on all of us at the moment, I think, to hold a lot right now. Yeah. You know, we've had back-to-back lockdowns. There's a lot of social and work and economic upheaval and instability for a lot of us. There's so much uncertainty and COVID weariness that many of us are holding right now. And on top of that, we're facing a lot of ecological and climate collapses and events that are pouring in from around the globe onto our screens. So yes, there's a lot that weighs heavy with us at the moment. And as an outcome, you know, many of us are really experiencing a lot of wobbliness or overwhelm or frustration and simply a lot of tiredness and weariness. And this raw, very off balance and we might say off kilter place can also harbour a lot of self-criticism as we negotiate with voices telling us this is not how the world should be or how we should be feeling at this point in our lives. And of course, when there's a general upward trajectory, if we want to talk about it like that, in our lives, when we feel like things are going according to our plan, of course, we can more easily feel like good meditators, worthy human beings, whatever we might want to say. But what about when life really starts to squeeze us and we're not feeling expansive or grateful or generous? So this is my exploration this evening with this talk. What about when we don't have the energy to sit on the cushion, when we don't have the energy for meditation practice or inquiry? When our practice feels like a chore or a survival mechanism and there's not really any joy in it. And then when yet another lockdown places more pressure on us socially, perhaps financially. And also I think there might be a sense of a gap right here for many of us right now between our ideals about life, you know, our dreams and our concepts about, you know, what we think our life is like, and the prickliness of actually what's right here in front of us. So, for example, at the moment, there's a strong urge for many of us to compare life now with how it was. And there's a lot of rhetoric around about, you know, when life was normal or when life gets back to normal. And I think this desire for normal is a really common reaction to the discomfort of what's actually here, where we don't know what's happening day to day. We don't know what's going to be next. So I think this losing of our reference points like this is pretty uncomfortable, to say the least. And in the chaos we feel around all of that, how do we relate to it all from a Dharma perspective? So this place of the squeeze, as Pema Chodron calls it, might be a lot more fertile than we think. There's a lot to learn in these dark spaces, in any dark spaces. In fact, a friend of mine called it in an email to me recently, the luminous darkness. And I thought that was a beautiful explanation that, you know, if we just change our frame, change our lens about how we look at something, it can change the way we respond to it. So on all these shaky edges that we're feeling right now, when things feel like they're not going according to plan, how do we relate to all of this? The meditation teacher, Reggie Ray, said, anxiety is a mark that reality is beginning to break through our shell. And I think that's quite telling. And actually, it's exactly where meditation practice can be most transformative for us. This gap between our ideals and what's actually here is a really ripe space for inquiry. And the Buddha referred to this relationship with painful or unpleasant experience in the Salata Sutta, which is often referred to as the dart or the arrow. And he explained that in each sense impression that comes to us in every sight, sound, touch, smell, taste, and thought, there's an accompanying tone of attraction, repulsion, or neither retraction or repulsion. Sometimes it's spoken of as neutral feeling, or we might look at it as a foggy or confused feeling tone. And one of these feeling tones spontaneously arises with each experience that comes to us. And it's not up to us which one arises. There's no choice in this, actually. It's an automatic, built-in feeling tone that arises automatically with each sense impression. We might call it an experiential marking conditioned by millennia of human evolution, if you like. So, for example, what if I turned on my laptop this evening and I checked on the Zoom link and as planned, Tori and Katrina's face popped up and I said, hi, great to see you, which is what actually happened. There was an immediate pleasant feeling when I clicked on that Zoom link and Tori and Katrina's faces popped up. That was just an immediate response that occurred. I didn't have to plan that pleasant feeling. It was just like, oh, great, I'm in, pleasant feeling. But it could have gone differently. So what, for example, if I turned on the laptop and clicked on the Zoom link and nothing happened, and there was a dialogue box that came up and said, error occurred. If this had happened, an unpleasant feeling would have arisen directly, and possibly the thought, oh no, what's happened? This can't be happening now. I need to get on. I have to teach in a minute. So you can see the difference there. There's just an automatic response that occurs in the body. Or the other option is that I might have turned on my laptop, clicked on the Zoom link, and found myself in someone else's meeting with unfamiliar faces, a whiteboard, some corporate meeting going on. And that would have created a very confused and a very confused feeling in me. So that's the other option. So there's these three movements of the mind that occur with every sense impression that comes to us. And often we don't even notice these feeling tones arising because they happen with such rapidity throughout our day and with such automatic nature that we don't even notice most of them. But they have a lot of amazing information for our meditation practice. So the particular feeling tone that does present itself essentially is part of the condition then for what happens next in my experience. It actually colours my response, and this is what we want to explore. So when, in the current example, an unpleasant feeling arrives with me sitting in front of the computer with Zoom not responding, for example, I might notice first a resistance to that, a flinching from what's actually here. And this is what the Buddha calls the first arrow or dart of distress. So along with that unpleasant feeling comes that dart or that arrow of resistance. Oh no, what's happening? This is not what I planned. So maybe, oh no, this can't be happening, comes out of my mouth. I feel a sudden contraction in the belly and the throat as fear arrives, and there's a narrowing of the focus as I try and work out what's going on. There's heat in the head. So some of these things might sound familiar to you as you have, as we all have similar computer problems from time to time. So right there, things feel not okay, yeah? And they're not going according to my plan. But can I stay with that not okayness? The uncomfortable sensations in the body and the sense of fear arising, the racing mind and my hypervigilance of time ticking, and really, I think underneath it all, that downright icky feeling of something not being right. So this resistance is a really common response, but what happens next can either send us into further cascades of distress or can ease the first arrow of distress. So if I lose mindfulness right at that point and get caught up in the resistance and the thoughts, and I let the thoughts and emotions then start proliferating about what's happening, this then turns into really more the stories about what's happening. So that then this then conditions the next moment to look very different. And this is where the second arrow pierces us. This is the second arrow that the Buddha talks about in the Salata Sutta. So we actually invite the second arrow because and when we allow the habitual mind to search for an alternative experience to cancel out the first. So sometimes in such times of discomfort, we'll reach for something and dash for an outer fix of some kind. So, you know, we might reach for our Instagram feed or a favorite food or pick up a book that we're halfway through. We'll all have our own responses and reactions in this respect. And the immediate need is for to get away from that initial discomfort and for us to actually go, oh, that feels better. So, does this make sense? So in my personal experience, though, we often head rather than outwards into a comfortable habitual storyline about me and my life. What I think my world is, who I think I am, and who I think I'm not, as a way of checking out. And we check out of this first experience because it's essentially physically really uncomfortable, and we've trained ourselves to get away from discomfort and to move towards comfort. So in this example, I might start catastrophizing about you know, when the Zoom link's not working. This is my example now. This always happens to me, or why do computers always do this? Or, you know, this can't be happening, why now? You know, the stories, we can keep building on these stories. A proliferation of thoughts driven by resistance to what's actually here. And then these thoughts might then lead to associated beliefs, perhaps, and emotions about the world being against me, how I can't possibly teach under these conditions. And this is where the second arrow pierces us. We've actually built the storyline to a crescendo where we can't possibly respond effectively with all these stories taking up the whole of our prefrontal cortex. So this is not boding well for a relaxing sit, is it? So all these stories shore up and solidify our views of ourselves and of the world, especially when the going gets tough. And these views are generally really well-worn territory, and often they're so familiar we don't even notice them running the show. And because they're familiar, it's easier to hang out with these stories of limitation than it is to stay with the raw, unknown territory of, I don't know what's going on right now. You know, this freshness of the present, which is always free of view and story. And this is what the Buddha calls the gratification of this feeling tone, that we keep trawling up our old stories and beliefs and then launch into the habitual actions that stem from these because we believe they'll bring us some relief. They'll ease the sense of chaos that we're feeling. That's why we keep going back to them. And this movement of the mind keeps getting us away, further and further away from the feeling of being out of control and closer to a feeling of, this feels better. Even if it lands us back in defended and really disconnected territory and a fixed narrow view over and over again, we keep feeling that this is where we're going to find relief. But the danger that the Buddha talks about in this of grasping for these fixes in whichever form they take is that they're, of course, fleeting, completely without substance. They're impermanent. They don't last. And sooner or later, we find ourselves back in chaos and searching to fill the hole again, to plaster over the discomfort once again. So this push and pull and this manipulation indicates how we so badly want life to fit into some preordained framework that we have around this sense of me and mine. And when something threatens that view, the status quo, it's quite human to freak out from that perspective. So essentially there's an ignorance here that we can hold on to this pleasure as a way to keep the painful at bay. And this is the second arrow that the Buddha explains to us. And it keeps us flinching from life as it is. And it keeps us on this wheel of push and pull, of always wanting life to be other than it is. But fortunately for us, the Buddha also offered an escape from this habitual cycle. And its power, as you probably recognize now from practice and from what I've been saying, actually lies in turning towards the present moment awareness and abiding with whatever's arising and noticing our response to it. So in the current example, if I choose to abide with what's happening, I'm bringing mindfulness to what's already here and unfolding. So I'm not wasting energy trying to get somewhere else. And this place is still really uncomfortable. Okay, it's not that it's not that it's going to go away because we stay with it, but we find that soon everything settles down a bit and becomes a bit more spacious. And this is because we're paying attention to it. Once we're giving something our full attention, suddenly the situation doesn't seem so personal. It's just a stream. We see that it's just a stream of events arising and passing away. And we can actually breathe again and loosen our grip. So interestingly, then what happens when we pay full attention to what's here is that we grant ourselves space around the proliferation of sensations and feeling tones and thinking that bubbles up and disappears over and over. And this is actually all we need to give our experience some authority and credence. And this turning towards what's actually here is actually an incredibly generous movement. It's a movement of our heart and mind towards life as it's unfolding right now. And what actually happens is that life meets us back. There's an inherent generosity here and a reciprocity between us and the unfolding of life as the moment to moment experience that we're having is actually fully seen and fully acknowledged. So what happens then in that, what we might call generous spaciousness that opens up, we can then more easily see or track the flow of events. So in the example that I've been using, I can see that actually all I had to do was click on the link in a different way, or, once we've got that space, we have options open to us. And once we're breathing freely again, we can see that there's actually no problem, because this is not my problem or something that I'm grasping onto. It's just something that, an event that needs to unfold in a different way than what we imagined. So once we can track this flow, we can then see how the flow of life comes into play and how it falls apart again over and over and over. And importantly, how our responses to this, how our relationship to this either leads us down a path of greater entanglement or towards greater flow and ease. And I think this is one of the great gifts of our human frailty, our fallibility, in fact, that if we didn't have to go through this learning over and over and over again, we wouldn't be able to free ourselves from these patterns. We actually need to see this and track what's happening over and over again in order to understand it really deeply, in order to understand how and why we do it. And only with that clear seeing then are we able to free ourselves from the cycle of distress. So as the Buddha says in the Salata Sutta, for a learned person who has fathomed the Dharma, clearly seeing this world and the next, desirable things don't charm the mind, undesirable ones bring no resistance. For a learned person who has fathomed the Dharma, clearly seeing this world and the next, desirable things don't charm the mind, undesirable ones bring no resistance. So what's he saying here? Clearly seeing this world and the next. This is referring to what's arising and passing away now, and understanding that each of our actions actually leads to the next arising. So this is discerning the interdependent, the interlinked and interconnected nature of all existence and every moment, each moment of our existence. It's the law of cause and effect. Once we know intimately what leads to greater distress and why, and once we know intimately what leads to greater ease and why, there's a great freedom. We're not grasping or pushing away. So our questions might be at any moment, am I feeling distress and confusion right now? Or am I feeling greater ease right now and clarity? Undesirable things don't charm the mind. Undesirable ones bring no resistance. So as I was just saying, when we understand this flow and we don't take it so personally, there's so much less stickiness to experience. We can actually sit back and watch the flow of pleasant and unpleasant experience unfolding without grasping at it and pushing it away. So no resistance and no gripping on. Again, this is meeting life intimately as it's flowing by. So in all of this, we simply start where we are in this moment, whether that's with ease or in a really dark place. And in working with where we are at each step, we're actually forming the conditions for the next step, for the next action. And even an intention to be with this unfolding is enough, even if it is just saying, this feels really hard, I feel stuck. And that's what we attend to. That's all we need to do. This is what our meditation practice is all about, attending to what's here right in this moment. And also attending to the resistance that's right here in this moment. So seeing if we aren't able to be with what's here in this moment, to see that as well is seeing. It's also seeing. And that brings me to, this constant encouragement that we all need, I think, to bring kindness and a light touch to this inquiry. Because these movements of mind can be so subtle and so sneaky. These habitual responses of the mind, reactions of the mind, really trap us and entangle us in such subtle ways. And this can be really challenging to the status quo when we see these cycles, these patterns. So we need to tread really gently, and I'd say with some degree of humour as well. So not giving ourselves a hard time when we do get caught up, as I just mentioned, and always seeing the gifts that are here presenting themselves right in front of us, even if it feels like we're not making any progress, that we're stuck again. Actually to see the gift that's presenting itself in every moment, in every experience, that we always have a choice to say, yes, I see you. I see you. So seeing these gifts that are always here, even in the most difficult of times, and also laughing at how we keep falling off the horse again and again. And also seeing how life keeps meeting us wherever we are. And then one day, nothing's left out, and all of life comes to meet us freely, unresisted, and perhaps even looks magical. So I'd just like to finish with a Zen poem from Layman Pangyun, who lived from 740 to 808, in relation to this letting go of this pushing and pulling, these movements of the mind that entangle us over and over, and the letting go of all of that. He writes, "My daily activities are not unusual. I'm just naturally in harmony with them. Grasping nothing, discarding nothing. Supernatural power and marvelous activity. Drawing water and carrying firewood. My daily activities are not unusual. I'm just naturally in harmony with them. Grasping nothing, discarding nothing. Supernatural power and marvelous activity. Drawing water and carrying firewood." Great. Thank you so much for listening and all for being here.